Hello, everybody, and welcome to Between Two Servers, the show for game developers. We're talking multiplayer and VR, and maybe a little bit of Metaverse today with Thad Frogley from Endreams Orbital. Welcome to the show, Thad.
Hi, Glenn. It's good to be talking to you today.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. So let's go a little bit back to you. So let's talk about your career at Climax, worked at Rockstar, and now you're at Endreams Orbital. Tell us a bit about how you got started in the industry.
I got started, my story goes back to when I was a little kid.
Right? Let's do it.
I did not do well at school. I was struggling at school, and my parents got me tested. Was there something wrong with me?
They found out that you were an engineer.
Yeah. Dyslexia was a new thing. Yeah. So I got tested for dyslexia, and they found out I'm a little bit dyslexic. I'm not good with my spelling. I don't remember long sequences of numbers very easily. I still really don't know my wife's telephone number, for instance. Yep. And I've been married long enough that should definitely be the case. To get to computers, home computers were a pretty new thing, and they were really pushed as oh, help your kids at school, at school with a home computer. I got as my parents got me a ZX81, and
Specky, got the Specky. That's classic.
Yeah.
Of course, you're in the UK, and of course the Specky in the UK is a big fucking deal.
Well, Sinclair was massive. It was the local boy done good. It was the UK's own Silicon Valley. And the ZX81 was this 1K, had 1K of memory, and that was it. If I wanted to play any games on it, I had to type them in off a magazine, and I had to be careful I didn't knock the keyboard in the wrong way, or the RAM pack will wobble and the whole thing's just gone. Yeah. And so a lot of magazines had, if you were into computers, you get magazines and you type in the programs, and either I would make mistakes typing them in, or they would have mistakes in the magazine, and then they don't run, and I have to fix them. So that's kind of how I started, typing in the games I couldn't buy so I could play them and making mistakes, and then fixing the mistakes. So I kind of learned to read code like that.
Were these in BASIC back then? I think.
Yeah, it's in BASIC. Yeah. I was 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. I was not I wasn't coding assembly. And I kind of went from that to a BBC, and again it was it's to help at school, but I was making games. And my whole kind of became the one thing I was good at. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't good at writing. I wasn't good at kind of classic schoolwork. I was good with computers. So this became my thing. I would get satisfaction from. Yeah. So I kind of knew my whole life. I kind of knew all through my childhood, what I wanted to do when I grew up. I want to make computer games. I want to be a programmer. I want to make computer games.
I knew that. I knew that too. I started in when I was 10. On an IBM PC-AC 286, 1987. And I knew also all the way before I was even, I knew I wanted to be a programmer. Yeah. 100%.
It absolutely, it's a blessing, right? Knowing what you want to do. So many people, I talked to a lot of people, I talked to a lot of young people. I've got my own kids, teenagers, and I'm involved in kind of a charity, community interest company called Into Games, that's about helping kids get into the games industry, kind of forging pathways into the industry. And so many people just don't know what they want to do, and that's hard. I talk to them, and they what's next. It's not that it's a blank page of excitement, it's a blank page of horror, right? How do I make these choices? How do I make these choices?
I just knew. I just always knew. I
went through my life just knowing what I wanted to do. So when I made the choices that took me down that path, and I ended up in college doing A-levels in maths, computer science, and physics. I flunked physics because I spent all my time in the computer lab making games.
I dropped out because I looked at the computer science, and again, I equated computer science with programming. Now, of course, we know now, being older and a little wiser, that there is a lot more to computer science than just programming. But I was already at age 18 better at programming than anyone else in the classes or in the labs. And it's because I've been doing it for 12 years, right? Now, I'm not saying I was shit hot at age 18, but like, you know, I was programming C, I was programming assembly, but there's the mathematics and the computer science. There is stuff there to learn. It's just I was too young and kind of, I wanted to be a coder. I really didn't want to be a computer scientist, to be frank.
Yeah, well, when I got to the end of my A levels, I kind of had this choice. It's like, do I go to university or do I like take a job in computing? I made this like demo, you know, the demo scene. Like,
yeah, I was in it.
So I made a kind of demo scene style demo to run on the computer. So I was working in Dixon's, which is a retail store, and I was trying to sell the computer. So I made this demo scene demo to make them all look really good. And this guy comes in and he's like, oh, like, I want to buy some computers for my business. Like, can you tell me about this? I've not seen this before. It's obviously been around the other stores. And I was like, oh, I made this, like, to show how good these computers are, because I'm trying to sell the computers. And he was like, you made that? That's incredible. You should come work for me. So I had this opportunity to like take a job for this guy who had his own computer business or go to university. So I went through the back. There's this magazine. It's still running, but it was like the games magazine in the UK in the 90s. It was like Edge. So I went through the back of Edge.
Yeah.
And like they had back then, you could get like a consumer gaming magazine, and in the back there'd be job ads for games companies. And I went through them, like just sat on the phone for a whole day, calling up these game companies as like a like 17, 18-year-old kid, just asking them, like, I have got like an opportunity. I want to get into the games industry, but I've been offered a non-games job, and I've also been offered a placement in university. Like, what's best if I want to be in the games industry? Is it experience as a programmer not in games, or is it a university education? And like 100% of the people was like, oh, get the job experience, get the work experience, don't go to university. Now I would never give that advice to people these days because times have changed.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it is different now.
There was like this perception that if you go to university, they'll teach you the wrong things. Like you will be taught about databases and like algorithms, and actually we need you to do assembly language and hacking and like just kind of make the computer do stuff. Don't be highfalutin and academic.
I've talked to people, even actually people that I've hired, and people today, I can ask them, what's 256 in a byte? And they won't get it. They won't get it. 255, like maybe, right? Or it's like, what's 1 to the power of 8 in a byte? Classic screen, right? What is it? Well, it turns out it's 256, but you can't store 256 in a byte because there's only 8 bits. You can store up to 255, so it wraps around a 0. They don't fucking know it. They don't know it.
I mean,
you don't know how the computer works that you're working on. You have to know how a computer works.
Yeah,
you just have to. Even if you're coding in Node or JavaScript, or just know what a fucking byte is. Jesus fuck.
Right? It's like, you know, Joel Spolsky's got this law of leaky abstractions, right? Like in the end, you end up having to know how things work, even when you build layers. Yeah. Because the abstractions.
You have to understand endianness if you're going to go, even if you're on a back-end program, or even if you're doing boring netcode. And how are you going to know what endianness is if you don't even know what a byte is?
I think you can get a lot done without knowing like those details, but at some point you.
I think it's because I did a bit of graphics programming, so I had to kind of get the byte drilled into my head.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. You can ask 99% of programmers today out of college with a master's. You could ask them this question and they won't know the answer. It's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, I got basically given this advice by the games industry as a whole in the UK. The UK games industry is its own like kind of special thing. And yeah, I took this job, and then like 6 months later, I was just doing Visual Basic front ends. I was doing Visual Basic front ends for database systems for like HR businesses, HR departments, like people's learning and development pathways. And a friend called me up, someone I knew from college, was like, oh, I've done this internship for a games company and they wanted to hire me, but I want to go to university. Do you want to apply for the job? He was like, I'll give you a referral, come in, talk to the guys. It was Julian Gollop from Mythos Games.
Mm-hmm.
So I did an interview with Julian and Nick, the Gollop brothers. They offered me the job.
Yep.
And then my friend changed his mind. It was like, I want to work here too. Like, should we all work here together? And they were like, yeah, they'll give him the job too. So
That's great.
It was basically the four of us making XCOM Apocalypse in this tiny little office.
XCOM, such a fucking great game. I loved it growing up. Absolutely loved it. Yeah.
I mean, it's the first XCOM Apocalypse
classic.
Is my first game. Like that's my first game I worked on professionally. That's my first professional game. So I obviously have a lot of love for it, a lot of stories about like the things I made for it. And it drives me bonkers now because people are like, oh, I love XCOM, and they're talking about the new XCOM.
No.
It breaks my heart.
The old is an utter classic. Like I played the shit out of that. Yeah.
Well, good.
Well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thad. Appreciate it.
It was an education. It was, you know, like the being a game developer in the 90s was like we had like a tiny office, the four of us. So this space you see around me.
Yeah.
I reckon this is bigger. My office now is bigger than the whole of Mythos Games was in the 90s.
Yep.
There was like I was sat here, Dave was sat next to me, Nick and Julian were just the other side.
Yeah.
And then we had these two other guys.
It was just a couple of dudes in a room.
Yeah, like we shared the office with two guys called Ian, both of them called Ian, a programmer and an artist, and they were making another game, just borrowing the office space. So there was like the six of us in this tiny, sweaty office above a chip shop in Harlow in Essex.
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. Wow.
It was good times. It was my 20s. In my 20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that. I went after that. I mean, Mythos Games expanded, and then like it hit hard times. It shrunk again. I worked for a company in Cambridge. You remember Creatures? Mm-hmm. So that was a unique games company, like Creature Labs or Cyberlife. It got renamed Cyberlife. They made the Creatures games with Norns, and like online communities got really like heated about whether Norns were actually living and whether you could be cruel. Can you be cruel to this virtual creature?
Interesting.
That you'd hatch from an egg and it was neural nets. So this company was founded like by really hardcore AI academics, like Cambridge professors, and they had their own separate office from like the games team, their separate office, and they did research for the military. Yeah, and they did like simulations of people moving around in banks, and then occasionally they'd essentially drop a white paper over the wall into the games company and be like, "Manna
from heaven, boys. Yeah,
you should use this tech."
Yeah.
So I was like making a virtual machine for their like wild programming language that they had invented. I was getting very nostalgic.
Yeah, tear in your eye over there. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
After that, they hit hard times because it was really like boom and bust in the games. The games industry is essentially like
UK in particular is a boom and bust cycle.
It's like what we would see. I remember it's like little tiny games company would struggle by on a shoestring, and like maybe have a bunch of terrible games that or even great games that don't get any traction, and then they get a hit, right? They get a hit and they get a ton of money because it's a hit-driven industry, and they would expand way faster than they should.
Yeah.
And they're not able to repeat that success. And this is happening. This is happening now with the indies. So like they should listen, right? When you get this big success, you've got lucky. You don't know how to make a hit.
You put it in the bank.
Yeah, like you put it in the bank. You carry on and see if you can repeat that success. And you know, some people do. People like Mike Bittnell has been like a really great business example as well as like a great game developer. But yeah, you like these companies, they'd get a hit and they'd like massive ambition, hire loads of people, and then fail to deliver. And then go bust.
The burn rate is so high, and it's just they need that hit and then they die. That's how it happens.
So in that scene back at that time, like it was like no one respected PC developers. Like the games industry was all about console. Yeah, like the Sega, like if you were making games for Sega or you were making games for Nintendo or bless you, Sony's new system, the PlayStation, like that was cool, right? That was respected because anyone could get a PC and make games. So I had this need to get a game out on the console, like be a console developer.
I felt that too. Yeah.
I worked for this. I went and worked for this company called what were they called? King of the Jungle. And again, this was this tiny little office in London. And I took, when I was job hunting, right? I had an opportunity to work for the Bitmap brothers, back
from the Amiga days.
I'm not
very well known.
Like I'm not
Xenon Mega Blast, etc.
Yeah, like
amazing games.
Honestly, like one of the best 16-bit developers ever in history. Like Speedball is one of my favorites, and Speedball 2 in particular is just absolutely brilliant game. But I had this kind of sense when I was in their office for the interview, like this was a company in decline, like they were past their best. And they were like, we're focusing on PC now. So I was like, man, I can work for this classic, like big name developer, Bitmap Brothers, who have essentially been my heroes for years. But I'm still doing PC games, and kind of felt like it was the milk was a little bit past its best. It was turning to cheese. Or this other company, what I hadn't heard of, I didn't know anyone, but they were making a GameCube game, a PlayStation game, and an Xbox game. Like across all three platforms, and they were using middleware, which was like
really new,
a risk. Like
this is sort of like the Criterion renderware era, so where middleware was coming out.
Like no one remembers this. They were using middleware called Netimers. But it was the competitor for renderware. It was Renderware or Metaverse, the two before Unity.
Yeah, and before EA bought renderware and stopped everyone else using it.
Yeah, like renderware and Netimers were like the two.
Oh no, actually, Netimers. I used Netimers.
Yeah.
In 2001 on Freedom Force at Irrational Games, which was my first game. So I actually was in the early, and that's David Eberle, the excellent mathematician.
It was a good engine.
That guy's a smart guy. Yeah. Right. I would propose that his scene graph based engine was not quite the most efficient way to implement a 3D engine, but having said that, like we shipped Freedom Force with it, and it was cool. Yeah.
So we were making this slot racing game. Like, I don't know why we were making Scalextrics, but without access to the Scalextrics license, right? Not, in hindsight, the best business decision. But for me, I got to play with like these three pieces of hardware, 3 console games. And that set me up for this opportunity to work for Rockstar, who needed someone to...
Yeah, full on. Like, I've worked on a console before. Come on in.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's really how it is.
I mean, the setup was perfect, right? I had just spent a year working across those 3 platforms, and they needed someone to lead their port of GTA 3 from PlayStation to Xbox. It's like, well, I've just spent a year on both platforms. I understand the differences. I can navigate this.
Was this PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 1? It's all blurred, isn't it?
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
I think it's GTA 3 was PlayStation 2. I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
like, I'm showing my age here.
This is back in the era when consoles were basically like, hey, by the way, you're writing a device driver. It's like, you want to do anything? You're writing a device driver. So it's pretty hardcore stuff there.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky. Like I had Netimers with the first round when I was working on Groove Rider. And then GTA is a renderware based game.
Yep.
GTA 3 is built in renderware, so we had renderware. We had their support before they were bought by EA. The shockwave that created in Rockstar when they bought EA was incredible. That was wow. In terms of like seeing a business the scale of Rockstar's just flinch because of like.
Well, these days, honestly, nobody is going to use any middleware and depend their game on it unless they have source code access. End of story, period. Right? Because of stuff like this.
Or
and even then, it's often not good enough because you don't get the support of the engineers anymore.
A lot of people put building their businesses in Unity without Unity source license access.
Yeah.
Like
I personally wouldn't do that. That's just me.
No, I when I worked for Boss Alien, the first, like, I worked there after Climax. They had a really popular drag racing game for mobile, and that was Unity. And I was a little bit nervous about coming in to a project where I didn't have source access. I was one of those guys sat there going, well, I have fixed engine bugs in my middleware in every project that I've shipped. Like, what happens when I hit that bug on this? But then, I mean, this is probably more than 10 years ago now. But like Unity's support was strong. If you had a problem, you message them. If you had the pro support, they would come in and they would help you fix it.
Yeah, that's definitely a positive for Unity there. So let's talk about multiplayer in VR. So you're working at Endreams Orbital.
Yes.
What can you talk about for what you're working on right now?
We are building a live service game. We think live service, a big component of live service for us is multiplayer, because we want to build a game that has a community about it. The kind of being in VR with someone is like being there in person. It's hard to describe. Like this face-to-face on a video call.
We're really aware it's separate. Yeah,
it's different. It's not the same, and I was very surprised. Have you tried Workrooms?
I haven't, but I did a little demo for Oculus. They actually paid me to make a big cube demo where you could pick up and stack cubes with someone else, and it's open source. It's pretty awesome. And the feeling of the presence, just being present in a virtual space, is very real. And then the feeling of having someone else there who can chat with you and talk with you, and you see, that's very real too. So I'm a believer, 100%.
Like we talk about in VR, like the sense of being in the place is like embodiment. You are embodied in that world, and you give people their hands. Hands are so important. Potentially a body, potentially an arm, but you don't need all of those things there to actually create this like incredible sense of immersion of being in a place. And then when you put other people in there and you see them and you have them in your, like, not just in the little box in front of you, but in your peripheral vision, and then moving, like, this is where we invest a fair amount of energy in networking, in multiplayer. And VR is like, get that head and hand movement natural and directly responsive. That's why they, like, Valve was invested in like the finger curl system of the Vive controllers. Why we pose hands depending on the haptic touching of the buttons. The buttons have haptics, so in sense where your hand is, and why Oculus is investing all that money in their like controllerless hand recognition tech.
I don't like the latency added by that, but
no, I don't. There's room for improvement. I think
I would say you'll be wearing gloves in the future. Let's just say that.
In my team, we have like a couple of times a week, we have just a purely social morning meeting, and we use Workrooms for it. Whereas we use Teams for most of our day-to-day business calls. But for this social one, we use Workrooms, and like they have the positional audio is really good. So such that you can actually have like sidebar conversations, and you actually really get that feeling of being in a social space with other people. That is relaxed. Like, we naturally on these video calls take turns in talking a lot more than you do in person. And I'm not sure if it's like something about the way the audio is processed, the auto mute, how auto mute cuts in, but the positional audio and the
could be the delay as well. There's like interrupting somebody. You want to wait a little bit to let them finish speaking and be 100% sure that you're not cutting them off, because you can't. I'm
not sure it's just the timing, right? Because in what, like, they can't eliminate that lag in a workrooms type thing. You're still transmitting the audio over the internet.
Perhaps it's that you're getting slightly fewer visual cues from the face, because the face often is telling you like, I'm about to keep talking, but now you can't really see that. So you got to assume that they're always going to keep talking and then wait longer to get confirmation. That would be my guess. Again, pulling that out of my butt.
But it just works is where I'm come from. Like it, and I think like that's what we're trying to do with the orbital projects. Like we want to create a space where people can immerse themselves in a world and be empowered. We're talking a lot about like being empowered in VR. You can
do things you can't do elsewhere.
Yeah, like I'm a big advocate of like giving people a space to create with others. It's about like the game. The game is important, right? But it shouldn't be 100% of your focus. Like being in VR can be quite tiring. So what we want to do is create like, and a lot of people, and it's that totally valid, creating incredibly intense games that you do, and you're like, oh my god, that was
come out sweaty, like, the sweaty game, right?
I mean, like Fract on PlayStation VR that we did with Endreams
is like VR,
it's intense.
If you do VR competitive shooting games the way that like an untethered VR experience would be, it could be as sweaty as literally running around a virtual space with padding everywhere and playing virtual paintball.
Yeah. I mean, right? It is. It's
and that could be a sport, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, if you've seen Gorilla Tag,
you don't want to play sport all day.
Yeah. Right? You seen Gorilla Tag?
I haven't actually. No.
That's
what they're doing.
I mean, yeah, it's tag in VR.
Oh, that's cool.
Like multiplayer tag in VR, and it's like it's incredible. But it's also like kind of basic, but it's so immersive and so kind of visceral that it gets away with the kind of like jankiness that a lot of VR experiences kind of have at the moment. But we're trying to do something a bit different. We're trying to do something that's like immersive, engaging, but also gives you space to be sociable and like giving people, like teleporting people into a fantasy place where they can just be and create and engage in an intellectually stimulating activity, which is the game, but also be with other people. Like, you know how like kids will get together in Minecraft Creative, right? And build stuff together. I think that's kind of, we're really early in our project, right? So we're still exploring concepts, still trying to figure out exactly what we're like. We don't have a game design yet. We're like, what do we think people want? What do we want? What can we create that is going to be exciting for people to come together and kind of, like be together in VR doing stuff that's interesting.
Yeah, I really think this is the killer app in VR, which is presence with someone over distance, real presence in a very meaningful way. Not necessarily a competitive game or even a gaming experience, but presence. We're going to be living the next century. I mean, we already all. How many people live on the same street as their parents? You want to hang out with your parents? You're not. They're over there. My parents are literally on the other side of the world, right? In Australia, right? The idea of being able to be present virtually in a higher and higher and higher fidelity way, I think is what excites me the most about VR. Let's talk about the thing that excites me the least about VR, which is blockchain and
my
Metaverse.
God. Like, I don't know why people are making those two things. Like,
I don't think they have anything to do with each other.
They don't. They're like, Metaverse is exciting, but it doesn't need blockchain. Like, like nothing needs blockchain.
No. Money laundering needs
money laundering needs blockchain.
Unregulated securities.
Pyramid schemes need blockchain.
Yep.
So, but not the metaverse. It's not necessary. The metaverse is just the idea that you have interconnectedness and virtual reality, that you can go and be in a virtual space, and that those virtual spaces can be created by and contributed by like all the people and businesses that want to add to that world.
Yeah. I'm perhaps skeptical of a metaverse. I think I kind of think that there will be many, and there will be multiple curated experiences.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just can't see the point of blockchain. And it seems like people looked at the really hard problems of, I want to create an amazing virtual world where people can do anything and whatever. And I've watched Ready Player One. I know the hardest problem is working at a database entry that tells me what sneakers you bought. Like, that's not the hard problem.
Not even
close.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations, you've created a really slow append-only linked list that happens to be distributed. I'm not impressed. All right, anyway. So I'm pretty bearish as well. So I really do believe in interactive virtual experiences in terms of, like, multiplayer programming becomes higher and higher fidelity. The presence and the interaction becomes higher fidelity over distance. We're bringing people together over distance. And I think that's a very noble thing. And I would like to call that metaverse. And I would think that there's sort of like a fully immersive version. And I think kind of, you remember when 3D came out and it was like a full pass through, and you could have you'd have your display, and then you could have 3D, and you had a regular video card, and then you had your 3D, and it would flick, right? I almost feel like VR right now is like 100% immersive or 100% AR, and eventually it'll be a mix of the two.
Yeah.
But I like to think of metaverse as kind of being these immersive experiences where you're fully in there, or overlay experiences where you're walking around.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting because the AR technologies are getting there, and I think the next round of headsets.
I can't see either of these things not happening in a 10 or 20 year time frame.
Yeah,
like gonna happen.
The headsets they're incredible. They're incredible. Yeah. And like, there's a lot of investment in the kind of the fidelity of pass through.
Yeah.
But I think the kind of activities that you do in VR versus AR, like, there's a clear difference.
Yeah.
Like, you immerse yourself in a world that's a fantasy, and you want to be. It's escapism in VR. Whereas
I want to be somewhere else. I want to be fully immersed in something else.
Yeah. Like, whereas AR is about supplementing, complementing,
replacing the iPhone. Right?
Yeah.
It's I want an iPhone glued to my face as I walk around. And I have a daughter, and trust me, she's 6, and she wants an iPhone glued to her face.
Yes. Yeah.
She would walk, if she could see, she would walk around staring at Minecraft all day as she goes to the fridge and gets breakfast. The iPad is like here. She literally, we have to put the iPad down when you get food to eat, mate.
Does she have an iPad and an iPhone?
She has an iPad and she has the Nintendo Switch, and she dual wields both of them as she walks to the fridge to get breakfast.
Yes,
kids,
put your devices down. You haven't had breakfast yet.
Yeah.
I've got a 13-year-old daughter.
Awesome.
And the game on, like, I will go into her room and she will have her laptop open with like Minecraft or some other kind of PC-ish activity that is a social activity, probably Roblox, actually, not Minecraft. Roblox is massive. Roblox should probably get more attention from the mainstream games industry. It is huge. She'll have Roblox. She'll have like a video on her iPad as well. That's maybe like a walkthrough of whatever she's playing, and she'll be on a call on her phone at the same time, a group call with like 3 or 4 of her friends that are all also doing those activities together with her. So it's highly social, but like multiple screens, all coordinated. And that's the metaverse, right? Like, add VR, sure. Like, it's about being existing in those virtual spaces with your friends. That's what the metaverse is.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So I think we know what the metaverse is now. Thad,
I've solved it.
Thank you. Everyone can just invest in Thad now. Me too. Why not? We know what the metaverse is, both the AR and the VR version. Honestly, Thad, I completely agree with you. So what's going to be interesting is seeing over the next 10 or 20 years, all of the different implementations of this and how it folds out, hopefully without any blockchain.
Yes.
All right, man. Thanks for being on the show. Super appreciated. And hey, if anyone wants to come work with you at Dreams Orbital, where should we send them?
They should come to our website, endreams.com.
Cool. Okay. Reach out and see if you can work with that. Okay. Cheers, everybody.
Cheerio. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Here's the hard truth. The internet doesn't care about your game. After all the blood, sweat and tears you put into making your game, you launch, and some players get terrible network performance. What can you do about it? Build your own internet? This is why we created Network Next. Network Next is a radically new way of linking networks together. It's a new internet. One where networks compete on a neutral marketplace to carry your game's traffic. Network Next puts you, the game developer, in control of the network. We monitor every player's network performance and you choose when to accelerate them. Not only will you see better network performance for your players, you'll also have the security of knowing that if one network is congested, we switch to another in seconds. Now you control the network.